This plane was one of the most famous and most successful bombers of World War II, which could carry even the biggest bombs available and participated in many special operations as well. But initially, it didn't start its life as a success. Only later modifications made it to the famous warplane we know today. This was the WWII Lancaster, the most successful British heavy bomber of World War II. So let's see the history of this aircraft today. The story of this aircraft starts back in 1936, when the Air Ministry announced the P-1336 specification, asking for a new all-metal twin-engine medium monoplane bomber, with the ability to carry 8,000 pounds of bombs, featuring power-operated defensive turrets, and provision to carry torpedoes internally. A requirement resulting in a very long bomb bay on the proposed bombers, allowing them to carry the biggest bombs in the coming years. As the requirements asked for a twin-engine aircraft, this limited the engine choices to the Bristol Centaurus, Napier Sabre, and Rolls-Royce Vulture engines, with strong preference given to the Rolls-Royce model. These engines were all still in development, but they were the only models with sufficient power. But as it turned out, this requirement became a painful mistake later. Many designs were entered for the new specifications, like the Bristol P-1336, the Hawker P-1336, the Handley Page HP-56, and the Avro 679, which became the Manchester bomber. After evaluation, in February 1937, the Avro design was selected as a winner, and soon two prototypes were ordered from the type. The Handley Page HP-56 was chosen as a backup, but this design was soon abandoned, and Handley Page decided to concentrate on their 4-engined HP-57 model instead, which eventually became the Halifax bomber. We will also look at that plane in a later video. Despite the Avro model winning the tender, the design team had doubts about the required engines, so multiple variations were explored during the design phase, using the radial Bristol Hercules or Centaurus engines as well. Also, different ventral turret variations were drawn up, either a retractable dustbin type or a remote-controlled unit. While the design team was still busy finishing their work, in July 1937, already a production order was issued for 200 Manchester bombers, under specification 19/37. The first prototype of the new model, L-7246, made its maiden flight in July 1939. This model had no armament, it used a 28 feet wide twin-tail design and a wingspan of 80 feet 2 inches. During the early test flights, it showed some instability, which was fixed by increasing the wingspan by about 10 feet. After several test flights, in November the same year, the bomber was handed over to the RAF for service trials. And during this time, an additional central vertical fin was fitted to improve directional stability as well. The second prototype, L-7247, made its maiden flight in May 1940, now fitted with full armament. By this time, the production of the first 200 units was well underway, following the 1937 order, which was based only on the blueprints and the estimated performance figures. Let's take a minute to mention an interesting fact here. As the newly developed bombers were bigger and heavier than anything before, and the RAF had no suitable airfields at the time, originally the new designs were required to have catapult launch capabilities as well. The catapult system was designed, and in 1940 the Manchester prototype was tested on it, despite the fact by this time longer concrete runways were built, so the catapult launch requirement was dropped in 1938. The first production aircraft was delivered to the RAF for acceptance trials in August 1940, just a year after the maiden flight of the prototype. In November, the first Manchester Squadron was formed, and in February 1941 they already started to fly combat missions. But these missions soon exposed a lot of problems with the type, caused by its rush to production and service. The X-shaped dorsal turret caused so much disturbance in the airflow, the later added middle tail fin experienced extreme vibration and flutter. Not to mention the numerous hydraulic failures, faulty feathering controls, and most of all, the engine troubles. The Vulture engine used on these bombers was basically two Rolls-Royce Peregrine engines mated together, creating a 24-cylinder, 1,845 horsepower monster, which on paper sounded good, a powerful engine in a single nacelle, but it had serious troubles with reliability. Some of the problems were fixed on the Manchester WWII variant. The central fin was removed, the tail was widened to 33 feet, and larger vertical tail fins were added. But the main problems were still the engines. The twin-engine setup of the Manchester meant that two engines just about had sufficient power for the bomber, and if it lost an engine, the plane became barely flyable. As many pilots expressed it, on one engine its flying qualities resembled of a gliding brick. But Avro was well aware of the engine troubles, and by mid-1940 they were already working on an improved variant based on the Manchester design. This was their Type 683, initially called Manchester 3, but eventually this was the design that became the Lancaster bomber. This new model used the Manchester fuselage but featured new longer wings, now with 102 feet wingspan, housing 4 of the well-proven Rolls-Royce Merlin 10 engines, each of them delivering 1,145 horsepower, thus improving the total power of the aircraft from 3,690 to 4,580 horsepower. In November 1940, prototypes were ordered from the new design, and it was decided it will be put into production as soon as the initial orders of the Manchester model ran out. The first prototype of the new aircraft, BT-308, was a modified production Manchester, featuring the original triple tail fin design, but using the new wings with the 4 Merlin engines. It made its maiden flight in January 1941, even before the first Manchester squadrons started to fly combat missions. The second prototype, which featured the full armament, the revised wider twin tail with the larger vertical fins, updated Merlin 20 engines, a new landing gear, and increased fuel capacity, took to the skies in May 1941. The increased performance of the new design was obvious from the start. The top speed increased from 264 to over 300 miles an hour, and in a dive it could even reach 360 miles an hour speed. Encouraged by the test flights, the Air Ministry decided to stop the Manchester production, and the partially completed airframes to be upgraded to the new standard and finished as Lancasters. As a result, the last production Manchester model, L7526, was immediately followed by the first production Lancaster, L7527, which flew the first time in October 1941. Initially, a contract for 1,070 units of the new bombers was issued to Avro, but it was soon followed by many more, and the number of bombers ordered soon outgrew the building capacity of the company. So Metropolitan Vickers, Armstrong Whitworth, and other companies also received contracts to build these planes. The Lancaster production grew so fast, it soon outpaced the Merlin engine's availability, and because of that, there were different models tested with alternative power plants as well. And that brings us to the different variants of these planes. The BT-308 was the original prototype, using the original Manchester fuselage with the triple tail fin design, but featuring the new wings with 4 Merlin engines. The B Mark I was the original production model, using the Merlin 20 engines. The B Mark I Special was a modification able to carry even the largest bombs, like the 12,000-pound Tallboy or the 22,000-pound Grand Slam. These models used stronger engines and reduced armament. To carry these giant bombs, the bomb bay doors were either modified or fully removed. The B Mark I FE was a tropicalized variant, with improved fuel capacity, modified radar and radio equipment, and they were usually painted white on the top to reduce the inside temperature. The PR-1 model was a photoreconnaissance variant, with the armament removed, featuring a modified nose and photo equipment in the bomb bay. The Lancaster II or B Mark II was a modification using the Bristol Hercules engines. These variants were designed to overcome the supply problems of the Merlin engines. Some 300 units were built. The B Mark III was similar to the Mark I but used the American Packard-made Merlin engines. The B Mark III Special was a modified model built for one purpose, to carry the so-called bouncing bombs developed for the Dam Buster raids. Their bomb bay doors were removed, and they carried the big drum-like bomb under the fuselage. The ASR-3 was an air sea rescue model, carrying a detachable lifeboat under the fuselage, featuring reduced armament and additional observation windows. The B Mark VI was a high-altitude variant fitted with Merlin 85 and 87 engines, featuring 2-stage superchargers. Thanks to the engine upgrade, these models could reach 313 miles an hour top speed and had a service ceiling of 28,500 feet. They were usually used as pathfinders. The B Mark 7 was the final production variant, equipped with a Martin turret in the dorsal position, replacing the former Nash FN50, and the turret was also moved forward above the bomb bay. The turret in the tail was also upgraded to the new FN82 model, featuring two 50 caliber machine guns. And finally, the Mark 10 was a Canadian-built Mark III variant. The Lancaster was 69 feet 4 inches long with a wingspan of 102 feet. It had an empty weight of 36,900 pounds and a maximum takeoff weight of 68,000 pounds. The bomber was powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, each of them developing 1,280 horsepower. With these engines, it could reach a top speed of 282 miles an hour and a cruise speed of 200 miles an hour. It had a range of 2,530 miles and a service ceiling of 21,400 feet. The plane's defensive armament included two 7.7mm machine guns in the nose, two 7.7mm machine guns in the dorsal turret, and 2 or 4 7.7mm machine guns in the tail. The tail and dorsal turrets were later upgraded and used two 50 caliber machine guns in both positions. Originally the Lancasters used a ventral turret as well, but this turned out to be near useless, with limited line of sight and slow tracking, so most of these were removed. Later, the H2S radar blister was mounted in the same place. The Lancasters featured a big single bomb bay, which was 33 feet long and could accommodate up to 20,000 pounds of bombs. The available ordnance included small incendiary cluster bombs, the usual 500, 1,000 and 2,000 pound high explosive bombs, and even the 4,000 pound so-called cookie. But it did not stop there. These bombers could also carry the 8,000 pound blockbusters, the 12,000 pound tallboy, and the 22,000 pound Grand Slam bombs as well, which were developed against heavily fortified targets. Of course, they could carry a variation of the above, except the biggest tallboy and Grand Slam bombs, which were carried alone. The most common setup was a 4,000 pound blockbuster paired with 14 to 18 smaller 500 pound bombs or small bomb containers filled with incendiaries. And of course we need to mention the most famous modification of the Lancasters built for the famous Dambuster raids. In 1943, during Operation Chastise, RAF bombers attacked dams in Germany, for which they needed special equipment. To be able to deliver the payload to the base of the dams, special bouncing bombs were developed, which were drum-shaped and were spun up by a mechanism before release, so they can bounce on the water surface, then sink to the bottom of the dam. It's an interesting topic, so in the future we will dedicate a whole separate video to this operation. The first production Lancasters started to arrive to the units in December 1941, and the 44th Squadron was selected as the first one to convert to the new type. They flew their first combat mission in March 1941, laying mines, and a week later they flew their first bombing mission against the city of Essen. During the early missions, some weak points were found on the wings, leading to the reinforcement of the wingtips and upper wing skin. And after the first few planes, a fairing was introduced around the dorsal turret. The Lancasters soon became the backbone of the RAF night bombing raids, and so many of these bombers were built, only the Spitfire and the Hurricane were produced in greater numbers during World War II in Britain. They participated in every major bombing raid during the war, like the famous 1000 bomber raid, the bombing of Bremen, and many more, and they also continued to lay mines against the German Navy as well. The Lancasters flew missions against almost every Axis target imaginable. But apart from the usual bombing raids, they also participated in many special operations. The most famous ones are of course the Dambuster raids in 1943 during Operation Chastise. The 617th Squadron flew modified bombers carrying the drum-like bouncing bombs attacking dams in the Ruhr Valley, and they managed to blow up the Möhne and Eder dams, striking a blow to the German industry. In 1944 the Lancasters flew missions against the fortifications on the Atlantic Wall, and this was the first time they used the 12,000 pound tallboy bombs. Later, the same giant bombs were used against the German U-boat pens multiple times. They used the same bombs again in late 1944 when they flew missions against the battleship Tirpitz, and after a bomb hit disabled the ship, another tall boy successfully sunk it. 33 of them were modified to be able to carry the 22,000-pound Grand Slam bomb as well, which was used against German bridges and submarine bases during the following months. But they also carried different type of ordnance as well. In April and May 1945, during Operation Mana, they delivered food drops to the starving Dutch population, in agreement with the German forces. If you want to know more about this operation, see my separate video covering this interesting event. After the war ended, the Lancaster stayed in service for several years, used by the RAF, the Canadian and French Air Force, and Argentina as well. The last of them was retired in 1954. The Lancaster was one of the most famous and most used bombers in World War II, able to carry even the biggest bombs, and thanks to its versatile design, it participated in many special operations as well. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.